We're going to move on to our last agenda item tonight. We have a presentation about the renaming at Dillingham Airfield. Thomas Shirai and Merle Anderson. As I stated before, we will hear both sides, and then they will entertain questions from the audience. We have a half hour. Tom, you have 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Merle. You may begin.
I don't have a big map to show you, but I do have a little one. This shows the Ahupua'a, or land division, which is the word I'm going to use from now on because I seem to murder the Hawaiian language, which I'm sorry for. Anyway, it shows Kaiana Point, and we have Keali'i, Kealia, and we have Kawaihapai, and then Mokuleia. This is another map, if you want to pass this around, showing the airfield strip. Oh, I see. Tom has a big map. Okay. Anyway, I have another map here, and this map. This map is the Pacific Ocean over here. Kind of point out here is Kealia, here is Kawaihapai, and Mokuleia. The Dillingham Airfield is on Kealia, Kawaihapai, and a little strip in Mokuleia. Does anybody want to hold this up? This is a better map showing the Dillingham Airfield. Okay. Now all I'm doing is giving you a little history lesson, I guess, on Dillingham Airfield. In World War II, the Dillingham family dedicated a strip of land to the military to build this airfield in memory. It is a memorial in memory of their son Gaylord, who was shot down in the early part of World War II. Now this land was donated and given to the military reservation, and it's now in military reservation land. They want to rename it to Kawaihapai, and they Dillingham had that land for a long time. They used to raise cows on it. They also had, as you know, the Dillinghams played an important part in the history of Wailua and Haleiwa area by building the historic Haleiwa Hotel and putting in the OR&L Railroad all the way around Kaiana Point to Wailua, all the way down to Kahuku and to Laie. They were also a pioneer in the Wailua plantation. They had rice paddies on their land. I just, this is a memorial to their son. I can't understand why we have to change the name, because it's in the Kawaihapai, except I know that Tom has some further things that he wants to talk about. So I am going to quit because I am against renaming that field. I'm willing to compromise, but let's hear what Tom says first. But no questions now.
No questions now. We're going to wait. So Warren, write it down.
Bite your tongue.
Okay, thank you very much. And Merle, what are you asking of this board tonight?
Well, it will depend on how they feel, I guess. I want to know if you guys would be willing to not go with renaming the field, or if you want to compromise, and we'll talk about that later.
Okay, Tom, thank you, Merle, very much. Tom, okay, you have 10 minutes, Tom, and I'll give you a 2-minute high sign. Thank you.
I can't take any more of my time because I didn't have 10 minutes.
Anawai ahi ahi. My name is Thomas Shirai Jr. My descendants are at least 7 generations, and my piko is at Kawaihapai. the purpose of this resolution, what I prepared here is to give you folks about the Poe Kahiko before I go into my detailed presentation. The name Kawaihapai is a tribute to faith in God. Once upon a time, that area, which is barren and water is scarce now, before used to be very fertile. That's why there's a big aquifer under that ground. The Hawaiian people thrived. They they were cultural specialists and they lived off the land and they malama did. One day it started to dry up. Everybody, because of the drought, did not want to stick around, so they decided to leave that aina, except for two kahuna who stayed back. This is where the lesson in faith comes in. They prayed to Keakua and their prayers were answered. Rain came down, or vai did not come down in the form of raindrops. God had provided water from a spring that comes out of the mountain. Thus the name Kawaihapai, lifted water. That's how they got the water. And upon seeing that, they told the people not to live, and the people lived happily ever after. That's one of the mo'olelo. The second mo'olelo connects Waimea, the Valley of Kahuna, to Kawaihapai. This talks about fishing. Again, two kahuna, while they were fishing, found a piece of wood that had been drifting all over this coastline, and one of the areas was Kawaihapai. In Hawaiian folklore, that was a kupua, and the name of that kupua was Kaneaukai. Kaneaukai instructed them and told them his desires. And so what had happened, the descendants of those two kahunas, with the wishes of Kaneaukai, erected a fishing koa down at Kawaihapai. The name of that koa is called Pu'uhekili. And in recent times, that story has been true because of the abundance of fish and seafood productivity. That is true, man. Whoever said, mm-mm. And now I'd like to show you that same map that Merle has. When you line up these four acknowledged sites from the Bishop Museum and how it pertains to my ohana, and here is one of their surveys in the 1800s. You line this up at Kawaihapai, they are all on the aina that they used to own. Hawaiian protocol goes by two things. In these days, when they had land, you had either been wealthy or you are related to the ali'i, or in some cases, both. In our case, of our ohana, you also have a man that was a konahiki, and also at the same time, the genealogy is related to the Kamehameha line. And that goes back for many, many generations, at least 50. Okay? So, when you, in Hawaiian, you have something called vai vai. Vai vai means wealth. He who controls the water becomes kanavai. You are steward of that source, and you had to be somebody of. This is again, this parcel shows where the Tero Lo'i were. In the front is the Kai and a wetland. Okay, my great great grandfather, he was such a man. Konahiki. He had several workers under him. So he was a cottage industry. They excelled in fishing and in agriculture, specifically taro productivity. What had happened? Life was fine and pure joy until World War II came around. The land was taken over and condemned under executive order to make an airfield for training. There is two categories of training: primary and secondary. In this case, it was secondary. So, in that executive order, after the war, it's supposed to revert back to the people. There was some sort of settlement, and that is why we have Dillingham Airfield today. Upon this Aina, not only my Ohana, but there are others, people such as uh, Mayahumi, uh, Kaulua Iwi, um, Ikiao, Poli, Makahi, Keahilele, Huo Kapole, Keahipaka, many, many Hawaiians, when they pass on, they bury on their own aina. Now, when they constructed this airfield, much destruction was attested to this desecration. One of them is my ohana. That is why I currently sit on the Island Burial Council, and my ohana has been very cooperative to and acknowledged by the Bishop Museum, by the federal government, by the state of Hawaii for cultural expertise concerning Hawaiian stuff. This land also, my grandfather saved a military sailor at Kawaihapai Beach. Some of my kupuna and elders that you see around you have served our capacities faithfully in the military, and we have no objection to them continuing on readiness because it is nec- necessary. So what I want to sum it up is this piece of paper. The Dillingham family has many, many, many worldwide monuments to them, ranging from Australia all the way down to Vancouver.